The special announcement is that tonight is Shalom's birthday, Stephen Maraglia. So we're going to wish Stephen a happy birthday, Shnas Bracha v'Atzlocha.
Happy birthday.
Be healthy and well, and God should give you many, many reasons to be happy.
Happy
We look
birthday.
forward to celebrating with you. So tonight's class, we're going to dedicate to the great honor of Shalom's birthday.
He's in the room.
He is in the room. He's in the room. Yeah. Okay.
That's unusual.
We're going to begin. There was actually a mistake in the typo of the phone when I wrote the topic of tonight's class.
Yeah.
I wrote that it's going to be two amitz is that changed the course of Jewish history. It's supposed to be two mitzvos that changed the course of Jewish history. So I'm glad everyone came for the amitz that changed the course. But we're going to deviate a little bit from that error that was what do they call it? The automatic
spell check
that happens. Okay, we're going to begin in the Chumash. If you have a Chumash, you can open it up to Exodus, chapter 12. And we're going to talk this week and the next couple of weeks about the holiday of Pesach. Passover is coming up. It's a major Jewish holiday, and we have to talk about this major Jewish holiday. And we'll come at it from different angles. Today we'll talk about a preparation for Pesach, which is necessary. And that is that this Shabbos is called Parshas HaChodesh. We read about the mitzvah, the first mitzvah that the Jewish people were given in the land of Egypt while we were still slaves in Egypt, before the 10th commandment. That was the mitzvah of Rosh Chodesh. But right after that, God said, at the same time, really, God said that on the 10th day of this month, so this is the first day of this month, the first month. And on the 10th day of this month, you should command all the Jewish people that they have to take a lamb. They have to bring the lamb into their home for 4 days and watch it. Then on the 14th day of the month, they shall slaughter the lamb, and they should take from the blood and put it on the doorpost. They should eat that lamb as a sacrifice at night, together with matzah and maror. And because that night I want to pass over in Egypt and all the homes, and we're going to kill all the Egyptian firstborns, right? So we know the story. That's why it's called Passover, because God passed over the Jewish homes, and the Jewish homes had the blood on the doorpost. Now, just parenthetically, just to point out the mistake that I mentioned once before that people make, common mistake that people make, especially when drawing photos of trying to depict how that night looked in Egypt. The blood went not on the outside of the doors. When you're walking on the street, you couldn't see the blood. God didn't need a visual to see. It was actually painted on the inside of the doorpost and on the lintel, not on the outside. So it was only for people inside to see that. And God obviously knew which home had it. And even if the Jewish home didn't have it, also a Jew that was in an Egyptian home also was spared. But be that as it may, we're going to focus on these words, the verses in the Chumash that describe this mitzvah, to tell the Jewish people to take the lamb and to bring the lamb as a sacrifice and to eat it that night. So we're going to begin. You have it on your paper. It's on the other side of this paper. No. So it's on this side of the page. Got it. So I'm sorry if the copy came out a little bit, something is off. I'm not sure what. We'll figure that out after. So we begin like this, Exodus chapter 1, verse 1. And God spoke to Moses and to Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be to you the head of the months. So you, what? That's too hard to read.
It's chapter 12, isn't it?
Chapter 12, yeah. What did I say?
1.
I'm sorry, chapter 12, verse 1.
Okay.
Speak to the entire community of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, let each one take your lamb for each family, a lamb for each household. You shall have a perfect male lamb in its first year. You may take it either from the sheep or from the goats. You shall keep it for inspection until the 14th day of the month. And the entire congregation of the community of Israel shall slaughter it in the afternoon. This refers to the afternoon of the 14th day of the month. Continuing, he says, they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel on the houses in which they will eat it. On this night they shall eat the flesh, roasted over the fire, and unleavened cakes with bitter herbs they shall eat it. This is how you shall eat it: your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is a Passover sacrifice to God. I will pass through the land of Egypt on this night, and I will smite every firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and upon all the gods of Egypt will I wreak judgments. I am God. The blood will be for you for a sign upon the houses where you will be, and I will see the blood and skip over you, and there will be no plague to destroy you when I smite the people of Egypt. This day shall be for you as a memorial, and you shall celebrate it as a festival for God. Throughout your generations, you shall celebrate it as an everlasting statute. This is where we have the holiday of Passover. All comes originally from, this is the first mentioning. In real time, it's being described and how it happened in real time, the Jews in Egypt. Okay. So this we all know already from the holiday of Pesach. Now, Rashi comments on the following verse. This is on verse number 6, where Rashi says as follows. The verse says, and you shall keep it for inspection. So the lamb, the goat, or the sheep was to be brought into every Jewish home, and it was to remain there for how many days?
8.
No, 4. On the 10th day, you would bring it in. You would hold it for 4 days. And the 14th day in the afternoon, you're going to slaughter it for the sacrifice, which you're going to eat that evening, as described exactly in detail. Why? What's this idea of inspection? Keep the animal for inspection for 4 days in your home. So Rashi says as follows. Lemishmeres, the word inspection, zelishoin bikur. This is an expression of inspection that the animal, requires an inspection for a blemish 4 days before its slaughter. Understood? So in other words, the sacrifice had to be perfect of any blemishes. How do you know if it's perfect of any blemishes? Well, you have to inspect it. So, you get a little scratch. Well, how do you know if it's a serious thing or not? Well, you see right away. If it's healing, it's going to close the next day. It's gone in 3 days. It was a nothing. So you have to inspect the animal to make sure that it was unblemished. Okay. Now, Rashi goes off on another thing. Why was this wait for 3 days for 4 days before slaughtering? Where we don't find that every future Passover, the Jews were required to take their animals and inspect them for 4 days. Brilliant question. In other words, every year the animals are not allowed to be blemished. You have to make an inspection every year on the animal. But we don't find you need a 4-day inspection every year. You can take the animal and examine it and bring it as an offering for my Passover meal tonight. Why in Egypt did it have to happen 4 days before? Why did we need an inspection for 4 days? Hoya Ramasya ben Chorosh Omer. So Ramasya, the son of Chorosh, would say as follows. Hareyu Omer, the verse says, I passed by you and saw you, and behold, your time was the time of love. What does this verse mean? The time to fulfill the vow made to Abraham that God would redeem his children had come, yet they had no mitzvahs in which merit to be redeemed. As the verse states, you were naked and bare. God therefore gave them 2 mitzvahs, the blood of the Passover offerings and the blood of circumcision, which they underwent that night, as the verse states, sullied with your bloods, denoting 2 kinds of blood, as the verse says, you too, with the blood of your covenant, I have freed your prisoners from a pit in which there was no water. Because they were entrenched in idolatry, God said to them, draw forth, meaning draw your hands away from idolatry, and use these animals for a mitzvah. So now, Ramasya ben Chorosh answered the question the following way. God promised Abraham that he's going to take his descendants out of Egypt, out of a foreign land. Now the time had come. God comes and he sees Jews. And what do these Jews look like? They look like Egyptians. What differentiates a Jew from an Egyptian? There was nothing to differentiate a Jew from an Egyptian. They were naked of any Judaism. There was no Jewish identity that they had.
But the names.
1 second. This is Ramasya ben Chorosh says. Different Midrashim. This is Ramasya ben Chorosh says. So God gives a look and he sees the Jewish people bare. What did God do? He made a promise. He's going to take them out, but they're undeserving. So God gives the Jewish people two mitzvahs. The mitzvah of Passover, lamb, Passover sacrifice, and the mitzvah of circumcision. Both have to do with blood. Both are a little bloody. And with these two mitzvahs, the Jewish people merit to leave Egypt. These are the two mitzvahs that happened then, before that evening, and it's in this merit that the Jewish people are redeemed from Egypt. Now let's talk about circumcision for a moment, because we know that the first person to circumcise was Abraham. God told Abraham already, and God told Abraham that he should circumcise his son Isaac at 8 days old. And from then on, the Jews already had a mitzvah of circumcision. The Jews were supposed to be circumcising every male born at the age of 8 days old. So what happened is, the Medrash says that the Jewish people did not, when we came to Egypt, in other words, from the times of when Isaac was born until we went down to Egypt, we were doing circumcision. But the generation that was born in Egypt, they stopped. For whatever reason, the Jews stopped circumcising. The only tribe that continued was the tribe of Levi. That tribe always circumcised. They were the only tribe that was not subjected to Pharaoh's harsh decrees. So Levi was good. The tribe of Levi, but Levi was only less than 1/10. It was only 1 out of 12 tribes. So that means 11 out of the 12, an overwhelming majority, stopped circumcising. And God wanted to redeem them. So what did God do? God said, go and circumcise. And then he mixed the blood. Some say that Joshua was the one that was in charge of, at that time, of seeing to it that all the Jews were circumcised. And God, so to speak, mixed the blood of the Pascal lamb and the blood of the circumcision. And in other words, these two together, this combination of these two elicited for them a powerful response from Hashem, that God would take them out of Egypt. God hugged them, God blessed them, and God took them out of Egypt. And this is what the verse says in Ezekiel. We read this in the Haggadah, in the Pesach Haggadah. We read this verse that says, in your blood you shall live, in your blood you shall live. This refers to twice. Once is the blood of the circumcision, and one in the blood of the Pascal lamb. Okay? So that we have these two ideas over here. Now, so that's the background to why the Jews needed to circumcise. Now, here's the question. Here is the question that we need to talk about. And that is like this. We get what Rabbi Masya ben Chorosh was suggesting. The rabbi was suggesting, and he stated that the Jewish people were naked of mitzvahs. They needed some redeeming quality, and God gave them these two mitzvahs as the redeeming quality. So now the real question becomes, why two mitzvahs? If they just needed something, so then one mitzvah should have been enough, right? And if there was something that they needed to have multiple mitzvahs, so then why stop at two? Why didn't you give them more than that if they needed more? Why are we focused specifically at two, that it's like these two mitzvahs that are the key to unlocking the Exodus? Following, got the question? So simple question on, in other words, we get the explanation what he says, but we're challenging the premise of the whole thing. Why do we need to have specifically two mitzvahs? Seemingly one should have been enough, and if one isn't enough, so then you need to have more. Then you should have the more the merrier, so to speak. Give them a bunch of mitzvahs, tell them do a bunch of them, and this will get you out of Egypt. It's almost like if he's using the analogy that God came and he saw the Jewish people bare and naked, so then someone's naked, you give them clothes. One garment can cover the whole body. They're no longer naked once they have one layer of clothes on. So give them one. That's the covering. Now, great. Now you have clothes. Now you can come out. If you need more than one layer, so then why stop at two? Put on a shirt and a jacket and a sweater and a coat, and it's never ending. So what happens over here? So the explanation is that, yes, it's true that we have 613 mitzvahs, which weren't given till later, but in concept, we have 613 mitzvahs. And every mitzvah governs a certain facet of our existence. And every mitzvah has within it very rich symbolism. And these two mitzvahs hold within them some very, very rich ideas, which, as we'll see in a moment, enable us to really understand what was happening over here. And that is as follows. The Jewish people didn't have a problem. We had a twofold problem. What was our twofold problem? Our twofold problem went like this. In kosher food, so we have what's called meat, dairy, and parv. Right? Things that are not meat and they're not dairy.
Like corn.
So if it's not meat, does it mean it's dairy? No. You can be parv, right? What was the twofold problem of the Jewish people? The twofold problem was, it's not only that we were lacking in some type of good quality, some type of mitzvah, for which God can hang his hat on and say, oh, this is what differentiates the Jews from the non-Jews. This is why I'm taking these people out of Egypt, because there's something good that they do. We were lacking that. So if we were lacking that, that just means we're at zero. But it was worse than that. Not only were we lacking something positive, we were actually also entrenched in the negativity of Egypt. We had sunken into and become fully immersed in the Egyptian culture. So it's not only that we weren't Jewish, but we were just Parav, we were just a lost people. No, we weren't a lost people. We weren't open and waiting for God to give me something and we'll follow it. We were completely the opposite way. We were completely the opposite. You're either with us or against us, no one middle. This was totally against. We were totally against the will of God. The Jews at that time were living in a way where they actually behaved like their Egyptian neighbors. So you're going to take them out of Egypt. If you give them something good to take them out of Egypt, what's going to happen? So now they have, it's almost like now you gave someone a redeeming quality who has a lot of garbage and baggage with them. So if you take them out of Egypt now, you're taking out all their baggage and they're going out with their baggage and garbage. They haven't changed. They haven't dropped. They haven't lost everything they were living, their way of life that they were living up until this point. That's going along with them. It just happens to be they also gave them something nice. They also put $1 in the pushka and then they went and they continued their sins. Beautiful, right? So they're just a sinful people. They're an Egyptian-like people that happen to also have one thing good. So that wouldn't be enough for God to just give them one positive mitzvah to do. God had to give them two mitzvahs. One mitzvah was to divorce them from their Egyptian culture, from their Egypt-like perspectives on life. And then after that, there had to also be something now to connect them further to God, take them from minus to zero, and then from zero to put them into positive territory. This is what we call in Hebrew, these two sides of the coin are called sur meira. We have to deviate from evil, but that's not enough. There also has to be v'asei tov. We have to do good. It's not enough to just say, I'm not going to do bad. I'm not doing anything then. It's also not enough to say, I'm going to do good and I'm also going to do bad. They're both not a good combination. The right combination is I'm going to stop from doing bad, and I'm going to invest in doing good. Both of these mitzvahs, each one in their own way, help the Jewish people get to where we needed to be. So these mitzvahs come out to be almost like general mitzvahs that help the Jewish people. It wasn't only the specific thing that they were doing, but there was something actually that was much more and greater than only sacrificing the lamb and only circumcising. So what's the idea of sacrificing the lamb? And how does that help? And how did that help the Jewish people in a most profound way? Because that's what they needed. So therefore, Rashi says like this. The Jewish people were entrenched in idolatry. Comes along God, and God tells them, Mishchu ukchu lochem. Draw forth and take for yourself. What does it mean to draw forth? Rashi says, Mishchu yedechem me'alilim. Draw your hands away from idolatry and take a sheep of a mitzvah. Because it's this mitzvah of the Pesach lamb, the Pesach offering, the sacrificing of this lamb in Egypt, which broke, which separated, which divorced the Jewish people from their Egyptian evil ways. We already learned in the Torah previous to when this portion was said in Parshas Va'era, the Torah, he tells us over there that the Egyptians at that time worshipped the lamb as a type of deity. There was worship taking place to many things, and one of the things which they worshipped was a lamb. This was a god for Egypt. Comes along God now and tells the Jewish people, what are you going to do? You guys want to know. You know the thing that your neighbor calls God? You know that thing that your neighbor worships, your neighbor prays to, your neighbor does whatever for it. And by the way, you were doing it too, maybe? You know what you got to do now? I want you to take that thing. I want you to kill it. Take it and slaughter it. That's a huge ask. It's a huge ask. If you understand what the sheep meant to the Egyptian culture, you understand what type of mitzvah this was going to be, what type of sacrifice. It wasn't going to be just for sacrificing the lamb. The Jews themselves were doing an act of sacrifice by taking the Egyptian god and slaughtering it for our God who told us he's taking us out of Egypt tonight. This was an unbelievable act of bravery on behalf of the Jewish people. To the point where the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu said, Ribono Olam, master of the universe. How could I do this? How am I going to tell the Jewish people to do this? You know that this is the Egyptian god. In other words, even Moses was like stunned by this major ask that God wanted from the Jewish people. Like, can we really expect the Jews to do this? So God said to Moses, the Jewish people will not depart from Egypt until they slaughter the god of Egypt before the Egyptians' eyes. And I will thereby inform them that their gods are nothing. This was a statement from God to the Egyptians. It wasn't only the way we usually view it and understand this as bringing a sacrifice to God. The Jews, they were doing something that God asked them. It went much, much further than that. This was a massive statement. This was front page of the local paper. Jews take Egyptian God and slaughter it in their homes. What's your God worth now? What do you believe in now? If this is what the Jewish people just did to your God. And the Egyptians reacted that way. They went nuts. when the Jewish people began to go through taking sheep, bringing into their homes, the Egyptians began to go nuts. A civil war broke out. It all started from the fact that the Jewish people said, we're taking lambs, we need lambs, we're going to find them, bring them into our homes, and in 4 days we're going to slaughter them, we're going to kill them. And God is coming, he's going to kill your firstborns. It set off a panic among the Egyptians, which we learn in other places how the Egyptians, there was a civil war that broke out in Egypt itself. Now we can understand why you needed 4 days for this. And this is something fascinating. A fascinating teaching is going to emerge from this, and that's as follows. The number one complaint, the number one, what's the right word? The number one accusation against the Jewish people could have been, easy accusation throughout the Jewish people, could be that we were under duress. We had no choice. In other words, God came to us and let us do this thing. I mean, like, what else? What are my options? Either what or what? Either you can't win the lotto if you didn't buy a ticket. So someone's offering me now a get out of prison card. He said, do this. And if I don't do this, my other option is, well, be here forever. So of course I'm going to, in other words, like, well, there's a massive ask that you have to do right now. It's a huge ask that I'm asking of you to do. It's like something that's crazy. It's bizarre. You may think you're incapable of doing it. All right. Hashem should bless you, Shimon. So the Jewish people were acting under duress because we couldn't think straight. We weren't thinking straight. What happens when someone asks you when you are in when do people make the poorest decisions in life in general?
Under stress.
Under stress. So when someone comes for advice, when someone is seeking advice, it's a serious issue, and you may not be able to tell them exactly what to do because whatever the circumstances, you can't tell them what to do. They have to make their own decision what to do. But what you could tell them is wait a few days before you make a decision. Think about it. So in English, many times people say, sleep tonight. You'll see tomorrow how you feel and then decide then, right? What we're going to learn over here is that from a Torah perspective, 1 day isn't enough. 4 days, if you want to make a sound decision, know that you've really thought about this and really gotten over it. And you can really come to this from a healthy perspective before you make a decision. Wait 4 days. Give it 4 days. Where do we see this? We see this right here in Egypt, where God tells the Jewish people, take the lamb and bring it to your house. You know why God never did it after this? Because after, there was never a statement that needed to be made to Egypt. It was already done. We already left Egypt. All the years that followed in the desert and then in Israel when the Jewish people would bring the Pesach offering and every Passover. But in Egypt, where this was about making a statement, God said, I don't want you to rush into it. I don't want anyone to come along and say that God confused you. No. This is going to be a mitzvah that's going to really set you apart. This is going to be the mitzvah that's going to give you the blessing to get you out of here. Think about if you want to do it or not. See if you're ready to actually take that knife and slaughter that animal right next door in the backyard where your Egyptian neighbor is watching what you're doing. Give it a day, give it 2, give it 3. On the 4th day, if you're ready, go ahead and do it. We find this also by perhaps the biggest ask that God ever made from mankind. And that was the ask that God made to Abraham. Where God tested Abraham, we know God tested Abraham with 10 tests. And the final test to see if Abraham was really devoted and dedicated to God, this was the test of telling him to take his firstborn son, Isaac, and to slaughter him as a sacrifice. The son that God promised him, that from him will be born future generations. God said, well, I know I told that to you, but now take him and slaughter. This was the most confusing thing simply from a mathematical, how is my child going to have children if he doesn't have children and I'm killing him? How do you make any sense? But obviously that's secondary to taking a human sacrifice. Your own son, he wants him to take his own son as a sacrifice. But this would be the indication, this would be if Abraham is ready to do it, this would show that Abraham doesn't question God. He goes ahead and he listens to every word unconditionally. Abraham would be the future of the chosen people. So what does God tell Avram Avinu? God doesn't tell him, take your son Isaac and bring him and kill him. That's not what God says. God says, I want you to take your son Isaac. He's very specific, tells him, I want you to take your son Isaac. And then he tells him, I want you to take him to the top of the mountain that I'm going to show you. And over there, you'll bring him for a sacrifice. He doesn't give him the precise location. He says, go to Har, so he does. He tells him, go to Har HaMoriah, go to the Mount Moriah. I want you to bring him over there for a sacrifice. Avram at that time was in the city of Hebron. Mount Moriah is where the temple is Jerusalem. The distance from Hebron to Jerusalem, I think it's about 20 miles, maybe 40 miles, maybe 40 miles. Nothing, definitely less than that. How long do you think it takes to go by foot? You can hop onto a donkey. I wouldn't travel with donkeys. Avram wakes up early the next morning. He saddles his donkey with Yitzchak and his other lad as a servant, and they make their trip to Jerusalem. How long you get on a donkey to Jerusalem? How's it going to take you? Doesn't take 4 days. No. It wouldn't even take you 4 days to walk. Take you 4 days to walk 30, 40 miles. Take you less than that. By Yom HaShlishi, on the third day, the verse says, and Avram lifts up his eyes and he sees the place from a distance. Oh, this is where God wants me. He sees the place from afar. Says Rashi, what was 3 days? What's this business? It took him 3 days to get there. It doesn't take that long. Says Rashi, you know why God delayed from showing him the place? Because God didn't want anyone to ever say that Abraham was confused. Abraham was under stress. He was pressured into doing it. All the excuses that people say why they made mistakes in life. Anytime you make a grave error in life, it comes post that there's an excuse of why I did it. My kids made me crazy. My boss made me crazy. I didn't sleep the night before. The next person cut me off. He started. There's always a story involved in why you made this mistake. Avram's going to go and kill his son. Avram, you thought that was a smart... Oh, I was pressured. I was nuts. I didn't sleep. God told me I misunderstood. I misheard. God didn't want anyone to ever say such a thing. God wanted him to do with the most clear and sound mind. How many days? On the third day. So the first day, God told him to do it. The next morning, he woke up and he began his journey. And then on the third day. So total, if you begin, it's on the middle of the fourth day. Is where Avram...
About a day to get there. It took him about a natural day to get there. Because the first day...
It took him longer. It should have taken him less. It should have taken him no time to be there. You got to get on your donkey and go there. You'll be there that day.
But the third day he was already there.
He saw where it was on the third day. That's where God allowed him to see where it was supposed, where exactly the sacrifice was supposed to be taking place. So you see over here that Avraham needed that clear mind in order for the test to work. Avram has that clear mind. He takes his son Isaac and he binds him on top of the altar and he's about to bring him. We know what happened. God tells him, no, I don't want you to touch him. Take him down, and he sees the ram and he takes the ram instead. And the rest is history, as they say. But you see a connection over here between this story and the Jewish people leaving Egypt. God wanted the Jewish people or anybody else for that matter, to never have an excuse of something, of an outside influence that pressured them into doing this, that confused them, that they misunderstood, that they misheard, they didn't have time to ask a question. No. Plenty of time. 4 days to sleep on it, to think it over, to realize what you're doing, bring the sheep into your home, live with it for a few days. This is the only thing that's on their mind. And then when you're ready to do it, now I'm telling you on the 4th day to go ahead, if you're still ready to go ahead and do it. This was the statement and the dedication of tearing the Jewish people away from the Egyptian culture in a most deep and profound way. If you're able to do this, you've killed the inner Egypt that exists within you. And the Jewish people, of course, go ahead and do this. That's why this is the mitzvah that encapsulates the sur meirah, the breaking away, the divorcing ourselves from evil. And then, of course, you have the mitzvah of bris, which the mitzvah of bris is a mitzvah which isn't just a one-off thing where I did something one time and then it's it's not something you can do haphazardly. It's not something you can do by accident. It's something that you have to think about. It's delicate. And what's the point of it? The point of it is to make a permanent reminder of the covenant between God and the Jewish people. So it's something that we're entering into a positive mitzvah, an engagement of a type of relationship which is going to be a permanent connection between me and you. It's not just a saying Shema Yisrael in the morning. It's not just a verbal. It's not even something, an action that we're doing with our hands or another part of our existence that is a short period of time and then it's over. I go to sleep and it's done and it's not connected to me anymore. No, this is the ultimate mitzvah of Va'aseh Tov, and do good. It's something which lives. It's a mitzvah which exists and lives within me, with me for all eternity. This bond that's created through the mitzvah of Bris Milah. So these are these two mitzvahs. And with this, we answered the question that we had earlier. Why 2 mitzvahs and why specifically these 2 mitzvahs? One final point. And that is, for those that study Rashi very well, if you study the Chumash with Rashi and the commentary Rashi, you know that Rashi many times from everywhere, Rashi basically is quoting from other sources. He seldomly quotes the person who he's quoting from. In other words, he's just giving it as an explanation. He's not there to tell you that, by the way, this rabbi, he doesn't quote the person, usually. When he does, it's for a reason why. In this instance, he does. He says, Rav Masya ben Chorosh would say. It's not even like he said once. He would say. It seems like this was something that he would say more than once. It was something he would remind his students of many times about this teaching, about these 2 mitzvahs. Why is that important? Why is that necessary? To know who said it and the fact that he would say it all the time. So for this, you have to know a little bit of the history of who this sage was. The sage Rav Masya ben Chorosh, he was a Tanoic sage who lived in the 2nd century. And he studied under the great sages of Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. His contemporaries, his colleagues were Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai and Rabbi Yeshaya. After the failed Bar Kokhba revolt against the Roman persecution, so we know that Bar Kokhba was a false Mashiach in some sense, because Rabbi Akiva thought he was the Mashiach until the Romans killed him, and also many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Jews also died in this terrible attempt to reclaim and reconquer Israel from the Romans. So many sages planned on leaving Israel. One of them was Rav Masya ben Chorosh, and when they came to the border, they realized there was a grave error that they were making, for whatever reasons, and they went back. They went back to Israel and they settled in Israel, but at a certain point, Rav Masya ben Chorosh actually moved. And he picked himself up with his students and he moved to Rome. And he established his yeshiva in Rome. And apparently he was good with the Roman local officials, and they respected him, I guess, to a certain degree. And that's the place where his yeshiva was. Which is a pretty fascinating thing in and of itself. That fact that he went there, even though initially he thought not to go, his colleagues did not go with him, but he went on his own and he established a beautiful yeshiva over there. And the question becomes, why did he do this? Why did he go there? And by he going there, by default, that meant that his students would follow him over there. Why did he feel that this was the appropriate thing to do? Seemingly, he should have stayed in Israel and allowed his students to stay in Israel with him. And the answer to this question can be found in this teaching of Ramasi ben Chorosh. He says like this: he knew that his students needed comfort for the fact that they were living in Rome and not in Israel. As, by the way, all of us should also. We also need comfort because our homeland is Israel. And even though we don't live there, and may have a good life, and you may even be in a big yeshiva and have a lot of students, it doesn't matter. A Jew always knows that his place and his homeland is the land of Israel. And so it's called the land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael, the land of the Jewish people. And if we're outside of Israel, it's a problem. You may have to be here. I'm not suggesting everybody should sell all your stuff and go to Israel tomorrow. You may have to be here for a reason, but we have to be reminded of why we're here. We have to be reminded this is not where we really belong, but we're here for a specific purpose. And this is what Rav Masi ben Chorosh would teach his students. He was telling them that in order for there to be a redemption, in order for Mashiach to come, in order for us to get out of here, we have to convert Rome. We have to make Rome, and what Rome at that time represented, that was the epicenter, that was really the source of all things antithetical to God, was seated in Rome. And he was telling them we have to find to be able to be a Roman Jew, so to speak. We have to be in Rome, we have to be Jewish. Not when in Rome, do as in Rome, but when in Rome, do as a Jew. We cannot be naked like the Jewish people were naked in Egypt, because God came to Egypt and he saw the Jewish people naked without any mitzvahs. That's why God gave them 2 mitzvahs in Egypt. God said, when you're in Egypt, if you want to be blessed with a redemption, if you want to merit an exodus from Egypt, then in Egypt, you have to break Egypt. You have to break Egypt when you're inside of it. So we're in Rome right now. We're in the thickness of the exile. That's where we are, sure. But it's specifically over here where we have to open up a yeshiva. And it's in Rome itself where we have to break all the things that Rome represents, which is anti-God. We have to break free and teach the world to break free of all of this narishkeit. Jews are everywhere. And a Jew that lives outside of Israel should realize that we're living here with a specific goal to accomplish. And the goal is to make America, to make Europe, to make Australia, to make Africa, to make Asia, to make South America, to make the entire world a world where God's presence is revealed. Currently, it doesn't exist because when you go around the world, what you see on the street is distraction, things which are definitely unholy, things which God does not approve of. Not only does not approve of, that would be parav, as we would say, no, but they actually go against the way of life that God asks us to live. So we have to convert that. We have to break the world free of this. First, we work on ourselves. Which is why the Rebbe would come out with these campaigns to put on tefillin on the street. When you're on the street, and people said, what are you putting tefillin on the street? You know what type of advertisement is right behind you or right in front of you? How can you put on a pair of tefillin when you see this barely dressed person on this massive billboard? It's inappropriate. You can't do it on the streets, etc., etc. The streets are filthy with unholiness. But the truth is, the approach has to be just the opposite. In order to merit in Exodus, in order to merit the revelation of God, specifically over there is where we have to bring God. We have to make even that space a place for Hashem. That's how we're going to bring about the redemption. So this is what Ramasi ibn Choresh wouldn't just teach it one time, but he would remind his students in Rome this idea why we're here. We're here for this reason, because God gave us mitzvahs to do. What are the mitzvahs? The mitzvahs can be broken up into two categories. There's the category of divorcing ourselves from the distractions and the unholy things. And then there is the investment, that where we have to put ourselves and our mind and our hearts and our families invested over there into doing good. This is a very important lesson for each and every one of us. Who is able to participate? Who is able to participate in this mission? Everyone. The same way as in Egypt. Every single Jew was given the mitzvah. Everyone is given this responsibility here now as well. We're all part of this together. Each and every one of us, in our own way. We all have our own space of work. We all have our own environment. We all have our own little group of friends or big group of friends, however you want, however famous or social you are. And each of us have to work on this. So the takeaway that we can all learn today, a fascinating teaching that we learned as a preparation for the holiday of Pesach. The Pesach holiday is all about Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yetzias Mitzrayim literally means the exodus of Egypt. The Kabbalists explain that Yetzias Mitzrayim means, Mitzrayim is from the word Meitzar. Meitzar means a constraint, a limitation, a bondage, an inner bondage. Anytime that we feel that we can't do something, we want to do something, we should be doing something, but we can't do it for whatever reason, whatever the excuse, whatever the explanation is, that's a shackle that's tying us down. That's a Mitzrayim. Passover is the Yetziah from Mitzrayim, the exodus from that burden, from that shackle, from that trauma, from that constraint and limitation. That's the holiday of Pesach. So when we get there, it's 7-8 days of God's energy, and then that energy helps us for the rest of the year be able to break out of any type of limitation. That's the energy of Passover. But to get to the energy of Passover, we have to have a Pesach where God tells us while we're still in Egypt, which is now we're still in Egypt, God says, this is how you prepare for the holiday of Pesach. With a clear mind. No one's forcing you to do anything. This is a decision you're going to make on your own. And you have to come to this conclusion on your own. This is what you want to do. And you're going to go ahead and do it, and people are going to laugh at you. People are going to mock you. People are going to say you're crazy. People may even threaten you. Look what you're doing. How dare you do this? How dare you go ahead and try it? Make sure you're going to do it. Think about it. If you're ready to go, when you make that sacrifice, in there will be the redemption. That's the key to your redemption. That's where, when the holiday of Pesach comes along, you will merit to have that exodus from your personal Egypt, hopefully from the collective Egypt as well. And that gives us the energy for the whole year. All right. Anyone have any questions? Yes, go ahead, Fran.